It's Thursday into Friday. It's the wee hours of the evening. And Jesus had just finished up his Passover meal with his disciples. Judas was released early from his duties there. And it's just Jesus and his closest three that were inside the Garden of Gethsemane while he was praying. And then the other 8 were sort of sitting at a distance. And all of a sudden things started to change. Jesus had just come through a very emotional prayer that we can read about. And he had to continue to wake up his disciples, those closest 3 to him, time and time again. And then finally he said to them, "Come, the time has come." And they get up. And all of a sudden, this dark garden area becomes illuminated. You see, Judas knew where Jesus and the disciples would go after eating the Passover meal. And what he did is he decided to go to the Pharisees and the teachers of the law and tell them it was time. The agreement that they had put in place to 30 pieces of silver to betray Jesus, it was happening, and it was happening now on this dark evening, and he was by himself. It was quiet. And when we read from Matthew 26, verse 47, it says, "While he was still speaking," which would be Jesus, "Judas, one of the 12, arrived. And it said, with him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people." Now you can imagine this calm night in this garden. It was very serene, and all of a sudden it is illuminated with torches and flames and noise of not just one person, not just 5, but probably dozens of soldiers as well as people carrying swords and clubs. And as they started to move forward towards him, they could see it was a group sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. It said, "Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man, arrest him." That was the signal, the one eye kiss. This would have been Judas talking. And he says, going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi." And he kissed him. Friends, they had been working together, walking together, talking for over 3 years. And instead of calling him Lord, instead of calling him friend, he refers to him as Rabbi, as in teacher. And he does what's normal in that culture. When you see somebody you know, you greet them with a kiss. But this wasn't an ordinary kiss. This was a kiss of betrayal. And Jesus replies in verse 50, says, "Do what you came for, friend. Do what you came for." You see, Jesus knows the heart of Judas, just like he knows the heart of all of us. And he says, "Do what you came for, friend." Now, that term friend, when we look at it in the Greek, is used only 2 other times in the New Testament, and especially in Matthew. And it's used for that friend who, well, it's more of your frenemy. It's not a true friend. He's not calling him best friend or anything. It's more of this term of, man, you missed it. You missed it, Judas. And it says, then the men stepped forward, they seized Jesus, and they arrested him. And with that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. It escalates super quick. Jesus is now in the hands of those who have come to arrest him. And one of the 11 that are there decides to defend Jesus, and he grabs a sword. Why he has a sword, who knows? But he takes it and he cuts off the ear of the servant of the high priest. What an amazing scene. All of a sudden, this chaos, this clamor. It was supposed to be quiet. It was supposed to be quick. And Jesus' response to that one who cut off the ear, he says, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword." Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way? You see, friends, this was all part of the plan God had put in place for humanity to save us all. You see, it was Jesus, and it was a betrayal, and it was an arrest, and it was everything else that's yet to come. And it was all part of God's plan. And Jesus is basically saying to that disciple, the one who was wielding a sword, listen, this is not part of the plan from God. Although it doesn't say it in Luke, what an amazing scene here. Luke doesn't communicate this, but another gospel writer does, that Jesus bends down, picks up this ear that had been cut off, and he puts it right back on that person who had it cut off. And all of a sudden, he is healed. Jesus is still performing miracles right at that point. But Jesus also said, don't you think I could call on my Father at once and have a disposal of 12 legions of angels? Friends, a legion was 6,000 soldiers, so he's saying, don't you think I could just get 72,000 angels here at once if this is the way it was supposed to go, if we needed to be protected? But it's not. This is supposed to happen, Peter. That's who he was talking to, as well as all the other disciples. And it says, in that hour, Jesus said to the crowd that was there before him, he says, am I leading a rebellion, that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple teaching, and you didn't arrest me then. But this has all taken place so that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled. You see, it was in that moment, it was in that hour, it was in that time that this was supposed to happen. And Jesus is like, wait a minute, it didn't have to come to this. You guys could have arrested me any time this week. I've been teaching, I've been walking and talking. Why now? Why do you want to do it in the middle of the dark? You see, but at the end of the day, it's the prophecy that Jesus was saying, I get it. I know why you're doing this, because what God has planned has to be fulfilled. Friends, and it was on those words that Jesus says one more thing in Luke. And he says, then all the disciples deserted him and fled. These men that he had grown close with, that he was teaching, that he was leading for the last 3 years, they all left. They all deserted him. They said just a short time ago at the Last Supper they would never disown him and they would never leave him. They would actually die with him. And they're gone. Jesus is now arrested. And he's being taken away.